The morning sun of Kethra Prime cast long shadows across the training grounds of the Vraxian Military Academy. Commander Vexala watched through the observation window, her 4 eyes blinking in disbelief at the scene below. 30 juvenile Vraxians, apex predators from birth, bred for conquest, stood in perfect formation, but they weren't drilling combat sequences or practicing their killing strikes. They were doing yoga. Explain this, Vexala growled, her mandibles clicking with irritation. Mary Chen didn't look up from her own pose, balanced perfectly on one leg with her arms extended. They asked me to teach them, she said simply, her voice calm and steady. So I did. It had started 3 weeks ago, shortly after Mary and James Rodriguez arrived as Earth's diplomatic envoys to the Vraxian Empire. The galaxy's most feared warrior race had finally agreed to formal talks with humanity, though most species considered it a death sentence. Humans were soft, weak, curious prey that had somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel. The Vraxians had other plans. They would study these humans, learn their weaknesses, and, when the time was right, add Earth to their ever-growing empire. James had been assigned to the political chambers, engaging in the tedious dance of interstellar diplomacy. Mary, however, had requested something unusual, permission to observe the Vraxian youth training programs. Vexala had agreed, amused by the idea of a human watching cubs learn to kill. What she hadn't expected was for Mary to participate. That first morning, Mary had simply found a quiet corner of the training ground and begun her routine. The stretches, the poses, the controlled breathing, all part of the practice she'd maintained since childhood. She hadn't noticed the cubs watching at first, their predatory eyes tracking every movement with intense focus. Young Kresh had been the first to approach. At only 7 cycles old, he was already 4 feet of muscle and claws, his scales gleaming obsidian in the morning light. "What is this?" he'd asked, his translator rendering his growls into perfect standard. "What combat form?" Mary had smiled, then, transitioning into downward dog. "It's not for fighting. It's yoga. It's for centering yourself, for balance and strength. Not for fighting." Kresh's head tilted in confusion. "Then why do you look so much like Instructor Vex when he prepares to strike?" She'd considered that, moving into warrior pose, legs wide, arms extended, gaze focused and fierce. Maybe all strength looks the same, regardless of purpose. By the second week, 5 cubs joined her. By the third, it was the entire class. They would finish their regular training, then eagerly gather around Mary for what they'd begun calling the Human's Warrior Meditation. Commander Vexala had been furious, but the cubs' regular combat instructors reported something unexpected: improved focus, better balance, fewer training injuries. The young Varaxians were becoming more efficient predators, not less. Still, it offended Varaxian sensibilities. "This is weakness," Vexala insisted, her tail lashing. "Meditation, stillness, these are not the ways of warriors." James had arrived at the training ground that morning to find his diplomatic partner in the center of a controversy. He'd been briefed on the situation, but seeing it was different 30 alien predators, each capable of tearing a human apart, moving through sun salutations with surprising grace. "Commander," James said carefully, "on Earth, our greatest warriors have practiced these techniques for thousands of years. Samurai, Shaolin monks, special forces operatives. The strongest among us understand that true power comes from control of body, mind, and spirit." "Ridiculous," Vexala spat. "Humans are weak. This proves nothing." Mary finally broke her pose, walking calmly toward the commander. Even standing at barely 5.5 feet to Vexala's imposing 8, she showed no fear. "Shall we test that theory?" The training ground fell silent. A challenge. The cubs drew back, excited but anxious. No one challenged Commander Vexala. "You wish to fight me?" Vexala's laugh was a terrifying sound. "I wish to demonstrate," Mary corrected. "Choose your best cub. Let them attack me with full force." James tensed. This wasn't part of their diplomatic strategy, but he knew Mareshi had a plan. Vexala gestured to Vexcor, the largest and most aggressive of the cubs. "Restrain yourself," she instructed. "I don't want to explain to High Command why we killed an ambassador." "No restraint," Mary insisted. "Full force, or this proves nothing." What happened next would be discussed in Vraxian academies for generations. Vexcor charged, a blur of claws and teeth, the kind of attack that had killed trained warriors. Mary moved not away, but with the attack. She flowed like water, redirecting force, using the cub's own momentum. In seconds, Vexcor was on his back, pinned not by strength but by leverage and technique. Mary released him and stood, not even breathing hard. "Yoga teaches us to move with intention, to be present in each moment, to use our opponent's force against them. It's not about being strong enough to overpower everything. It's about being strong enough to not need to crash. Stepped forward, his young voice clear. The human shows us another path to strength. Commander, we are still warriors, but now we are warriors who cannot be unbalanced. Vexilla stared at the scene, her 4 eyes finally seeing what she'd missed. These cubs weren't becoming weaker, they were transcending simple brutality. They were becoming something the Vraxian Empire had never produced. Warriors who fought with both body and mind in perfect harmony. Continue, Vexilla said finally, her tone grudging but respectful. But you will also teach the instructors. If this is a warrior's path, then all Vraxians should walk it. As the commander left, James approached Mary with a grin. You know, when they asked me to come on this mission, they said diplomacy would be boring. Mary smiled, watching the cubs return to their poses. We're not just diplomats anymore, James, we're teachers. And maybe that's the real reason humanity survives out here. We don't just adapt to the galaxy, we help the galaxy adapt to us. The morning sun continued its climb as 30 juvenile predators held warrior pose. Perfectly still, perfectly balanced. And in that stillness, they learned what humanity had known for millennia, that the greatest strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the discipline to choose when not to. Tomorrow, Mary decided, she would teach them tree pose. The galaxy wasn't ready, but it would learn. Humanity always found a way to leave its marks, sometimes not with weapons, but with wisdom.